Wherever you're catching the programme from today, welcome to Moscow and to the News Hour on RT. I'm Ewan O'Neill. Let's get to our top story. There's been yet another gruesome discovery in Canada. 182 unmarked indigenous graves have been found close to a former Catholic school in the province of British Columbia. The discoveries have brought shame on the country's Canada Day. RT's Alex Mihailovich can tell us more.
Discovery after discovery. The latest one was on Wednesday, 182 bodies found in Cranbrook, British Columbia. This is close to a residential school. They use basically a radar that looks underground, and that's where they found these people in unmarked graves. That adds to the initial finding, which happened on May 27th in Kamloops, British Columbia, at another residential school of 215 people as young as 3 years old in unmarked graves. And then, of course, Saskatchewan, which was the biggest find so far, 751 people. So you add all these numbers up, over 1,000 people found, but we have over 130 schools like this across Canada.
You learn not to cry anymore. You just get harder. And yeah, you learn to shut down.
Every day you were in constant fear that your hope was that it wasn't you today that was going to be the target, the victim.
The program started in the late 1800s and lasted all the way up to 1996 when the last school was closed. That's 150,000 Native children ripped out of their families' arms and put into these schools. They were forced to go to these schools. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were complicit in it. They were the ones that would take the children from their families to the schools that were run primarily by the Catholic Church at about 60%, but also Anglican and Protestant and other smaller churches across the country. The levels of abuse that we found at these schools was absolutely mind-blowing. I just have to read something for you quickly. This is a 1907 report from the Department of Indian Affairs. It was called the Bryce Report. Documented 40 to 60% mortality rate in these schools, mostly of tuberculosis, and then a 90 to 100% of these children, this is unbelievable, suffered either from physical, emotional, or sexual abuse.
It was a genocide, and you look at the whole point of the residential school was to take the Indian out of the Indian, to get rid of our language, to get rid of our culture. Every First Nation person is feeling the impact of the residential schools. My grandmother attended, my grandfather attended. Thankfully, my mother didn't have to attend, but she still feels the impacts on it on a daily basis.
We still have rates of 80% abuse on these First Nations because of this legacy left behind by these churches and the Canadian government, which funded all of these programs. So Canadians are demanding that the government do something about this. We did have, back in 2015, a commission that said that this was a cultural genocide. They did very little about it up to now. Now people are demanding the Prime Minister do something about it, and the Prime Minister, as well as Indigenous communities, are demanding an apology from the Catholic Church.
I really hope that this time it will lead towards the Pope coming onto Canadian soil and apologizing directly for the responsibility that the Catholic Church shares in this part of our history.
Now, and what is believed to be a reaction to what has happened in the past month or so is the churches are being burnt down on Native communities and close to residential schools. We've heard of 5 in British Columbia, 2 in Alberta, and 1 all the way at the other side of the country in Nova Scotia. The Prime Minister has said that destroying places of worship is not the way to go, obviously. But at the same time, Canadians are looking at this situation in a much broader perspective. This is Canada Day here. There is a movement not to celebrate. Hopefully, Canada will do more, and that's exactly what Canadians are demanding at this point.
Well, Pope Francis has previously apologised for suffering brought about by the Church. During a visit to Ireland in 2018, he asked for forgiveness for the Church's abuse of power and for preying on children. Stories of wrongdoing by the Catholic Church had been mounting in Ireland since the 1990s, with reports citing thousands of boys and girls abused and exploited in schools run by the Church, and hundreds of babies dying in church-run orphanages. An activist against church child abuse, David Greenwood, says Rome hasn't shown itself to be cooperative when undergoing this and similar investigations.
I'm not sure whether an apology from the Pope really goes very far. I think that there is still a lot of anger within the population of Ireland that we haven't had a proper investigation into the activities of parish priests and what has happened at a parish level. The culture of the Catholic Church is to keep everything hidden, to keep everything in-house. I very much doubt that the diocese in Canada will cooperate and help with providing documentation unless it's absolutely forced to. It was the state in the first place that placed children there. It was almost childcare on an industrial scale. I think the time has come for the state in Canada, the law enforcement agencies there, to get hold of this documentation. It seems as though crimes have been committed. Why can't law enforcement in Canada get court orders to seize this type of documentation?
Moscow has launched a major revaccination